Life demands so much from us: our energy, our time, our patience, and our strength. We often run on autopilot, pushing through each day, checking off tasks, and meeting expectations without stopping to notice how deeply it all weighs on us. At some point, the weight becomes too heavy. It's not just physical tiredness that pulls you down, but a deep mental and emotional fatigue that makes everything feel harder than it should. You might not even recognize it right away because exhaustion doesn't always show up as yawning or wanting to sleep more. Sometimes it hides in your thoughts, in your mood, and in the way you connect, or fail to connect, with the world around you. If you've been feeling off, disconnected, or overwhelmed without understanding why, you might be dealing with mental and emotional exhaustion. Let's talk about 10 clear signs that your inner world is crying out for rest, care, and healing. The first sign is constant irritability and mood swings. When your emotional reserves are running on empty, the smallest inconvenience feels massive. Someone cutting in front of you in traffic, a friend forgetting to reply to your message, or a tiny mistake at work might trigger an outsized reaction. You're not an angry person at heart, but exhaustion strips away your patience and your ability to regulate emotions. Things you used to brush off now leave you fuming or in tears. One moment you might feel hopeless, the next you're snapping at someone you love, only to feel guilty afterward. These fluctuations are a reflection of your nervous system being stretched too thin. When your mind is fatigued, it doesn't have the strength to filter emotions, and instead of responding calmly, you react impulsively. If your days are filled with irritability and your emotions feel like a roller coaster, it's a strong indicator of inner exhaustion. The second sign is trouble focusing and difficulty remembering things. Mental exhaustion blurs your thoughts. You find yourself rereading the same sentence multiple times, forgetting appointments, or struggling to follow conversations. Tasks that once seemed easy suddenly feel overwhelming because you can't gather the mental clarity to complete them. You might walk into a room and forget why you went there, or stare at your to-do list without making any progress. This isn't because you're lazy or incapable. It's because your brain is overworked and under-rested. Just like muscles ache after too much physical strain, your mind aches when you push it beyond its limits. Lack of focus is often one of the first cognitive warning signs that your mental energy reserves are dangerously low. The third sign of mental and emotional exhaustion is losing motivation for things you once enjoyed. Maybe you used to love painting, going out with friends, or hitting the gym, but now the thought of doing those things feels overwhelming. Hobbies that once brought joy feel like chores, and even basic responsibilities like cooking or cleaning seem insurmountable. It's not that you've lost interest in life, it's that exhaustion robs you of the spark that drives enthusiasm. This lack of motivation is deeply tied to emotional fatigue. Your brain interprets every activity as extra effort, so instead of excitement, you feel resistance. Over time, this can leave you isolated and disconnected from yourself and others, reinforcing feelings of emptiness. The fourth sign is sleep problems, either sleeping too much or not being able to sleep at all. Exhaustion doesn't always translate into peaceful rest. In fact, when you're mentally and emotionally drained, sleep often becomes disrupted. You might find yourself tossing and turning, replaying stressful thoughts over and over, unable to shut your brain off. Or you might experience the opposite, sleeping excessively, as though your body is trying to escape the weight of reality. In both cases, the quality of rest is poor. You wake up tired, no matter how many hours you slept. Exhaustion affects the nervous system, and that imbalance interferes with the natural sleep cycle, leaving you trapped in a cycle of fatigue. The fifth sign is feeling detached or numb. When you've been under stress for too long, your body and mind sometimes shut down emotionally as a defense mechanism. You might feel like you're just going through the motions, watching your life instead of living it. Laughter feels forced, tears don't come as easily, and even big events fail to stir excitement. This emotional numbness can be frightening because it feels like you're losing your connection to yourself. It's not that you don't care, it's that you've been caring too much for too long, and now your system has gone into survival mode. Detachment is your body's way of conserving energy, but it also leaves you feeling isolated and disconnected from the people and passions that matter most. The sixth sign is frequent physical symptoms without a clear medical cause. Mental and emotional exhaustion doesn't stay locked in your head. It often shows up in your body. Chronic headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension, dizziness, or unexplained fatigue can all be signs that your mental state is wearing you down physically. Stress hormones like cortisol flood your system when you're exhausted, creating inflammation and disrupting the natural balance in your body. You may notice your appetite changing, eating too much or too little, or frequent colds because your immune system is weakened. These physical signals are your body's way of telling you that the emotional strain has gone too far. Ignoring them often makes things worse because unresolved mental stress builds until it forces you to slow down. The seventh sign is feeling overwhelmed by small tasks. When you're mentally strong, small challenges are manageable. You handle them and move on. But when you're exhausted, even the simplest responsibilities feel monumental. Doing the dishes, answering an email, or making a phone call suddenly requires tremendous effort. You procrastinate, not because you're lazy, but because you don't have the inner resources to deal with it. Everything piles up, and that mountain of unfinished tasks increases your stress, creating a vicious cycle. People around you may not understand why you're struggling with what looks like minor responsibilities, but for you, it feels like climbing a hill with no energy left in your legs. This sense of overwhelm is one of the clearest signs that your emotional and mental fuel tank is empty. The eighth sign is withdrawing from people. Exhaustion often leads you to pull away from friends, family, or coworkers. Social interactions start to feel draining instead of nourishing, and you may avoid calls, cancel plans, or isolate yourself more than usual. It's not that you don't care about others, it's that you don't have the strength to engage. Conversations feel heavy, and being around people feels like more pressure than you can handle. Isolation might feel comforting at first, but it usually deepens the exhaustion by reinforcing feelings of loneliness. Healthy connections are essential for emotional well-being, but when you're too depleted, you retreat, creating a gap that makes it harder for others to support you when you need it most. The ninth sign is frequent feelings of hopelessness or despair. When you're emotionally exhausted, your mind struggles to imagine a better future. Problems feel permanent, solutions feel out of reach, and everything starts to look darker than it really is. You may catch yourself thinking, "What's the point?" or feeling like no amount of rest will make things better. These thoughts are not a reflection of reality. They're symptoms of depletion. Exhaustion distorts your perspective, convincing you that there's no way out, when in fact what you really need is restoration and care. Hopelessness is one of the heaviest burdens of emotional fatigue, and it's often the one that convinces people they're stuck forever, even though recovery is possible. The 10th and final sign is struggling to regulate your emotions and feeling easily overwhelmed by them. Emotional exhaustion leaves your mind hypersensitive. You might cry at commercials, panic at small setbacks, or feel devastated by criticism that normally wouldn't bother you. Your emotional threshold shrinks because your resilience has been worn away. This makes you feel fragile, like even the smallest wave could knock you over. Emotional flooding becomes a daily reality, leaving you mentally drained after even short interactions. When every feeling feels too big to handle, it's a clear sign your inner reserves are dangerously low. Recognizing these 10 signs: irritability, difficulty focusing, loss of motivation, sleep disturbances, numbness, physical symptoms, overwhelm, withdrawal, hopelessness, and emotional instability is not about labeling yourself as weak. It's about acknowledging that your mind and heart have limits, just like your body does. We live in a world that glorifies constant productivity, but the truth is, rest is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Mental and emotional exhaustion doesn't mean you failed. It means you've been strong for too long without giving yourself the care you deserve. Healing begins with awareness. When you see these signs in yourself, it's an invitation to pause, to breathe, and to nurture the parts of you that are tired of carrying so much. By paying attention to these signals, you can begin to restore your strength, reconnect with your emotions, and move toward a life where energy and joy return.